I'm of the opinion that we live in a time where wisdom is not valued, it's not pursued, and I wonder why that is. I think for many of us, maybe we don't even think about wisdom, but often I think it feels mysterious or it feels unattainable. We don't know how to gain wisdom or grow in wisdom. And I want to take some of the mystery out of that today. I want to suggest that wisdom is attainable. That's not to say that it's simple or easy, but I believe there is a way to intentionally pursue wisdom in your life. My name is John Chandler, and on this channel I actually talk about practical wisdom for mindful living. But today I want to talk specifically about wisdom, why you might want wisdom, and how to pursue wisdom in your life. Perhaps you've heard the famous quote by Socrates. It's actually written by Plato, quoting a speech of Socrates where he says, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And that alone is a meaningful quote to sit and dwell on, but the story of it is actually pretty fascinating. Briefly, Plato is recording Socrates giving a defense of himself for the work that he had been done. He had been accused of leading the youth astray by having them explore philosophy, having them ask bigger questions, and he was being disruptive, so he was on trial, potentially even for his life to come to an end, to be put to death because of the way that he was corrupting the youth with his ideas of philosophy. And so as they were pressing him to relent from his views, ultimately he said this famous quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Personally, I find this quote to be timeless. I think it is as valuable today as it was then. I think it's as important to consider today as it was then. I do believe that the unexamined life is not worth living. And while we might not directly be putting someone on trial with their life in peril for having such ideas, I think that there are a lot of currents that are, some of them are overt, some of them are more subversive, that challenge the idea of wisdom in our culture. We're threatened by exploring new ideas and seeing what we might pull from them, what we might bring from them. And all of that is contrary to living a life of wisdom, of bringing in broader perspectives so I can make more sense of what my life is all about and then have a life worth living. So I hope that you will desire wisdom in your life. And I want to offer you today what I think is a relatively simple formula for what it looks like to pursue wisdom in your life, but that's not to be confused when I say a simple formula with something that is quick and easy and 3 simple steps to gaining wisdom in your life, because this is a process. This is a life of deliberate intention where wisdom is gained a little at a time. But I do want to suggest at the end of this video that there is a great multiplier to wisdom, to gaining wisdom. The first part of the quote formula for wisdom is knowledge. And that's not to say that knowledge is the same as wisdom, or even that simply just gaining more knowledge leads to wisdom, but it is part of the formula. Unfortunately, we live in a time where there is, I think, an overemphasis on knowledge. We have the capacity to ask AI. We have the capacity to look up a YouTube video. We have the capacity to use that antiquated form of search engine to find whatever knowledge it is that we might want to have about something. And so we can consistently fill our minds, fill our notebooks, fill our hard drives with knowledge. And that in itself is not bad. It's a great gift that we have readily available to us. So much information, so much content about things that might be beneficial for us and might be useful for us. So I wouldn't tell you to give up on knowledge, of course not. But I do think that knowledge is the easier way to go. And sometimes we just settle for knowledge and say, I know how to solve this problem because I have the knowledge to do it. And sometimes that's all that's needed. But for a life worth living, for a life that has a growing amount of wisdom, a life that has discernment about how to face difficult times or work through and discern difficult choices that are ahead, we need more than knowledge. What comes after knowledge then that helps to grow wisdom is experience. And I know this isn't rocket science, but experience is what happens when you take the knowledge that you have, or sometimes the lack of knowledge that you have, or the ignorance that you have as you experience something in your life, and you learn from it. And so when you can take knowledge and you can add experience to it, that starts to become wisdom. That is this growing foundation of wisdom, because you're able to take the knowledge that you have, you're able to take the information you have, the things that you've learned, and you're able to make sense of how they shape your life, how they might shape the decisions that you've made. I think one of the best ways that this idea has been outlined recently is in this book, From Strength to Strength, by Arthur Brooks. I feel like this is one of the best books I've read in the last few years. And what he writes in this book is he describes how early in our life, our natural bent is towards knowledge. Our natural bent is towards learning new things, learning new capacities, and applying them. But what he describes is as we go along in life, that capacity to learn new things and challenge ourselves in those ways starts to diminish. But what he says we gain then is a capacity for wisdom, that as we have these life experiences and we start to pull from what we learned here and what we experienced here, we start to synthesize these things into our life. And that leads to wisdom. So that's a relatively simple formula. Then for how do we gain wisdom? We are intentional and we pursue knowledge. Absolutely read books. I'm a big fan of reading books. Put yourself in the way of interesting information, helpful information that you can learn and take in, because that does work within your life. That does give you this base of knowledge, this base of information to draw from, so that when you have experiences, those experiences can be tested with that knowledge, or perhaps rather that knowledge can be tested with those experiences, and you can understand what is the knowledge that I have that is beneficial for me, and what is the knowledge I have that perhaps is useless and can be discarded. Now, I said at the beginning, though, or early on, there is a multiplier, I believe, for how we gain wisdom and how we grow in wisdom. And certainly, it is as simple, quote unquote, as wisdom comes when we combine knowledge with experience. But there is a multiplier that you can add to the equation, and that multiplier is engagement. So if you can imagine a simple formula where you put together the addition of knowledge and experience in parentheses, and then outside those parentheses, you multiply that sum by engagement. I believe that is where wisdom can really begin to flourish and really begin to grow in our life. And what I mean by engagement is just intentional reflection. Taking time, making space to reflect on the knowledge that you have, reflect on the experiences you have so that you can make sense of them. So something as simple as a practice of journaling is engagement. It's self-reflection. It's a multiplier for growing in wisdom, especially, and I've talked about this before in a prior video, I will link below, especially if you are reviewing that journal and looking back at your life through the lens of the present to see what experience you've had, what things you've learned, what mistakes you made, what things you did right. So personal self-reflection is a level of engagement that comes with wisdom, but there's an even greater multiplier for wisdom through engagement, and that is engagement with another. I was just journaling this morning, in fact, about something in my life that I've been reflected on. I feel like some new self-understanding. And I literally wrote in my journal, I want to reflect on this tonight when I'm meeting my friend over drinks. Because he and I get together every few weeks and have really thoughtful conversations. And I realized that though I wrote that in my journal, these ideas about my own life that I was considering and these new insights about my life, I knew that they would start to be crystallized, perhaps even challenged, when I sit with him tonight and have a conversation about this growing awareness that I have about myself. And that just writing about it in my journal is one thing, but teasing it out in conversation and having it be reflected back to me or having it be challenged back to me is really going to help these new understandings grow into something that is more wisdom-based, that will help me discern how I engage in my life going forward in light of this. Best way I come to understand this is a quote that comes from David Brooks, and it's in the last chapter of the book, How to Know a Person. He talks about one of the benefits of knowing other people is the wisdom that you gain. And he says, wisdom is not mostly a trait possessed by an individual. Wisdom is a social skill practiced within a relationship or a system of relationships. Wisdom is not mostly a trait. So an individual can have wisdom, but where wisdom really flourishes, where wisdom really grows, where wisdom can be most present is when it is in the dynamic of relationship, that as we talk with others, as we share experience with others, that's where wisdom has this flourishing that I'm talking about. That's how we can engage our knowledge and experience through interacting with another and with their knowledge and with their experience to see wisdom grow in the relationship and therefore carry over into how we live our life. So yeah, this isn't easy, but it's attainable. There is a way for you to have a life that is worth living by pursuing wisdom. Part of the reason I'm talking about this is I've just become more and more passionate that this season of life that I'm in, I want to see wisdom happen for others. I want to see wisdom happen in my life, of course. But I want to see wisdom be something that is treasured again. I want to see wisdom be something that is valued again. I want to see wisdom be something that is sought again. In the work I do, part of the work I do, I work as a spiritual director, but I'm realizing that the conversations that I have with people in spiritual direction are not always these grand spiritual ideas, but they're often very practical ideas about how do we make choices, how do we discern things so that we can live our life with more wisdom. And so I'm expanding the work that I do, doing something called wisdom sessions. And very much the idea of wisdom sessions is what I've just described. It is making space for engagement, where someone can come and sit with me. Perhaps you can come and sit with me, and maybe you're wrestling with a transition that you know might be imminent in your life, or that you're already in the midst of in your life. Or maybe you're wrestling with how to be more intentional to grow to be the kind of person you want to become, or just practicing individual reflection on your own to know yourself better. And so I am starting to offer wisdom sessions. I would be glad to sit with you, to meet with you over a series of sessions to explore some of these topics with you, to offer engagement that can be a multiplier for your own growth, your own wisdom. In the description below, you can see a link to my website where I offer these wisdom sessions. You can go to trellis.life/wisdom-sessions and find more information there. I'd be glad to answer your questions in the comments, or you can read more there. Thanks so much for making it to the end of this video. May wisdom be part of your life. May it grow in your life. Thanks for watching.